Hey everyone, it's Carl, and death is just the start of something else. It's a change from one state to another, and you create a new character.
It's a savage world, strange as a wind war. It's a savage world, classics to explore.
Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. I'd love it if you like, subscribe, check the Twitter thing out. We're not going to be famous, but it'd be cool to see the numbers go up, and it kind of makes me feel good. Anyway, so let's talk about death and dying in Savage Worlds, the RPG. Is Savage Worlds hard to die in? Is it easy to die in? There's always, sort of different opinions because of the way the Savage Worlds has multiple roles around death. That it's not easy enough to die, it's too difficult to die. Some people say it's too easy because it's not an attrition system, so you could get a huge hit that takes and creates like 7 wounds that takes you right into incapacitation. I don't know. I guess it's a personal opinion. I don't think it's too deadly. I think it's just right. But let's talk about it. So to start with, we already know that a wild card can have 3 wounds, and then on the 4th wound will be incapacitated. Doesn't matter how many wounds are done with a single attack. So let's say you had an attack, a lot of exploding dice, and you do 7 wounds. You're still got 3 wounds and are incapacitated. Those other 4 wounds don't get banked so that when you get healed, suddenly they come into play. It doesn't work that way. So if somebody comes along and you're incapacitated and they heal you, 1 wound, you're coming back and you're only having 2 wounds. Those don't matter at all. So what happens when you get into the incapacitation? When you get that 4th wound that takes you out of the fight, immediately you're going to do a trait roll of a vigor roll. And that vigor roll, depending on what happens, really drives what goes on with the character and how deadly or how close to dying the character is. If you get a critical failure, you get those double ones, you're dead. It's over. Now, critical failures are a little difficult to get with the 2 dice, but, that's what's going to happen. If you don't get a critical failure, but you still fail, you do not succeed, you will have an injury, and that comes off the injury table. And that injury table provides some mechanical disadvantages based on having an injury. Things like lowering a trait die, some hindrances that are now in play until they are ultimately healed or bought off if it's a permanent one. So if you've got a failure, you get a permanent injury and you're bleeding out. And I'll talk about bleeding out in a second. And that's the other case of where death is imminent. But let's talk about, so this roll, this incapacitation roll, if you succeed, you still have an injury off the injury table, but now it's not permanent. That injury goes away when your wounds are healed. Easy enough. If you have a success with a raise, then the injury just goes away in 24 hours or until you're healed, whatever's earliest. So if you don't heal a wound and you're now doing natural healing, in 24 hours, this injury will go away while you're doing the natural healing. So that's the important part from that vigor roll, or that incapacitation roll that uses the vigor roll. Yes, you can die right away there, and on a failure, you're almost dead. But that it's not right away unless you get that critical failure. But bleeding out is a big deal too. So what's bleeding out? Bleeding out means an injured character on the beginning of each turn. And remember, even though you're incapacitated, you're still getting your initiative card, even though, and this is important, Mark, some of those things like level-headed, quick, they don't apply anymore when you're incapacitated. But you still get that card because it's important where you end up in the order of turns in case somebody's trying to heal you or do something like that. So on the beginning of your turn, you're doing another vigor trait roll check. And if you fail that, now you're dead again. If you succeed, you've survived the round or the turn, and then the next turn comes around, you're going to do the exact same thing. And if you fail at any time, you're dead. The important part, though, is somebody can step in and do a healing roll on you And if they succeed at the healing roll, you're stabilized. So you're still incapacitated, but you're no longer in danger of bleeding out and dying. You can do, healing power. You can do a regular healing roll. Either way, you're stabilized. So that's the key piece there. So death comes if two things happen. First, you have to fail your incapacitation roll. Second thing, you need to not have somebody able to stabilize you before you end up bleeding out if you're on a failure. Again, critical failure on your incapacitation roll, you're just dead. So there's some things to work through there before you die, but it can certainly happen because you do have on that trait roll, you do have all the negatives that come along with doing that trait roll. So one of the things that then kind of gets people, at least I've heard, and this goes to the folks who are saying it's too hard to die, they go, well, okay, so you're just going to get healed up, never a big deal. Got to remember that healing, and this is a nuance here, you can only heal one wound, 2 wounds with a raise, but that's it. For a healing roll, you have to spend 10 minutes doing that setup to do that healing. And in 10 minutes, there's a lot of battle can be going on. The person can get hit a couple times. There's a lot going on. Remember, each round is fast, or each turn is fast. It's not 10 minutes. So getting those wounds and having those wounds stack up is a big deal because it's going to be tough to do that healing during the combat. Even the healing power only heals 1 wound or heals 2 on a raise. Difference is the healing power you can cast as many times as you want. And each turn you might be able to do some healing again for the player. So even in that case, if you're incapacitated and you do the heal, you might only get them from incapacitated to 2 wounds. And then another combat round comes around and the foe's going at you. They only need to do 1 wound or a couple of wounds and you're incapacitated again, and you're back in that state. So the fact that there is healing doesn't make death not a possibility. It doesn't. I think in D&D maybe I'm thinking more AD&D 1, maybe 5's different, but it's very easy to just heal up all your wounds quickly and keep you in the fight without having any real danger. But anyway, so that is Incapacitation, dying in Savage Worlds. Again, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Please like, subscribe. Love doing the content. Would love you to show that you like it by subscribing and help me get those numbers up because it would look cool to me. Thank you much. Talk to you later.
It's a savage world. Strangers are with war. It's a savage world. Classics to explore. It's a savage world.